My name is Andrew. I'm moderating the session today, and you said it's about telco versus techco. And I was thinking about this morning. I was thinking, in the distant days when I used to work in the corporate world, this idea of telco versus techco was the sort of thing that every now and again you got as a kind of senior management meme that came out of the heavens on high and came down and said, right, guys, we've now got to be we've got to be a techco now. No, we're not a telco anymore. We've got to be a techco. And I was thinking, I think our job on this panel is to try and interpret the kind of the heavenly meme that has come down from the gods on high of wisdom that says we have to change from one thing to another. What does it actually mean, and how do we do it? And I'm very pleased to be joined by, as Annie said, a very distinguished panel. I'm going to ask to introduce themselves, but I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a very specific way, and that is, first of all, their name and their role, but also briefly how they think this idea of telco to techco will change their job, their future in the next 2 to 3 years. So that is what we'd like to do. Generally, just as an overview, what I like to do is follow a reasonably straightforward flow where we're going to talk about, well, what's the opportunity? We heard a little bit about that from the previous speaker, but I'd like to hear, we'll go into a bit of discussion between us about what we think the opportunities are from a telco viewpoint. We'll talk about what the challenges are, but most importantly, what are the next steps? What do you do to create this change? And to some extent, how do we know when we've got how will we know when we have taken the template from heaven that says this is what we must become? How will we know that we've got to this goal? So with that, I'm going to ask, if I may, I'm going to do this completely randomly and unfairly. The first person on my screen is Stephen. So Stephen, would you mind introducing yourself? So if we go Stephen, Nemanja, Jesus, and Luis in that order, that would be brilliant. So Stephen, over to you to introduce yourself, your role, and what telco to techco means to you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Andrew. So I'm Steve Beadle. I'm the IT Chief Architect for 3 UK. So I'm responsible for looking after both the longer term strategic vision and the direction and the roadmap, working with the business and the IT and networks to define sort of how we get there. I've been working at 3 for past 2 years, and prior to that I worked with Accenture for 20 plus years, delivering IT BSS transformation programs and defining different strategies and roadmaps. So I think fundamentally we're already technology companies. Everything we do in a telco is driven by technology, both on the IT side, on the BSS, the integrations we provide to partners, from billing to allow people like Netflix or Spotify to charge to bill, to provide additional services for B2B customers like mobile device management. Going back down to the network and some of the cloud core that we have at 3 and some of the properties there. So I think the Techco evolution is more about doubling down on everything that we already do, doing it better, doing it faster, doing it quicker. It's about defining a sort of a more digital architecture, and potentially more flexible and more open, to allow us to react to sort of business and industry needs and demands more quickly, and better focus our limited resources, both CapEx and people, on the things which deliver business value.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Very good. Nemanja.
Hello, my name is Nemanja Ognjanović, and I've been with Telecom Serbia for 17 years now. And my current role includes technology strategy, which of course part of it is the network transformation, or things we have to do to support the business transformation. And the reason we have to transform is we need somehow to catch up or to fight back to the tech costs, because we understand that the world is changing, of course, and new opportunities and new services come from the digital players, the companies that practically no assets. So somehow we need to fight back. I call it this way, but in a good sense. So this is my role, and these are my expectations from this panel and everything, to see how we can help each other in this transformation.
Thank you, Nemanja. Jesus.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, everyone. Jesus Villacorta. I'm leading strategy, M&A, new businesses and transformation at Orange Spain. Before that, I was a partner at Boston Consulting Group. I was a consultant myself. And as you can imagine, being the strategy guy, I spend a fair amount of time looking at the technology side of the business, the technology space, looking for new opportunities, looking for ways of running our business. And that sometimes the grass looks greener at the other side of the fence, right? But the name of the game is not about telcos becoming, in my view, it's not about telcos becoming a Microsoft or an Amazon or a Google, but there are a few things that we can learn from those technology companies, and definitely there are things that we can do together and complement each other. And to me, this is the name of the game. It's not about us becoming them. It's about learning from them and building fruitful corporations.
Thank you. Luis, on to you.
Thank you, and hi everyone. My name is Luis Anaya. I'm working in the technology strategy team as technology strategy manager, and I work with the rest of the organization to define and drive the execution of our 5-year strategy vision. Before that, I've been working in Vodafone for about 13 years in different teams like networks and also research and development. I was also the chairman of one of the working groups at the 3GPP and F3 organization, some of you may know. And for me, it's all about how we've really transformed the business into becoming more agile, be more flexible and adaptive to what really matters to our customers, do it in a way that we drive new revenue sources, and as well we focus in simplicity. So and the reason is why we do this. So in the past, we've been always very critical in the way we were serving the services to our customers, and we proved that during the pandemic. Everyone realized how critical our services are. At the same time, we've been seeing how difficult it is to really monetize and make this as a business, a sustainable business at the same time. So we are really in a turning point where we really need to focus on the customer, adapt the way we are working. So for me, it's all about changing and adapting the way we do things in the telco space.
Thank you, Luis. And thank you all for that excellent introduction. Some of the themes that we talked about as we prepared for this, you've already highlighted here, which is great. We talked about being more innovative and agile. We talked about changing the business model. And I think one of the things that Jesus was talking about when we talked about this before is attracting new investment, because that's one of the challenges in the telecoms business model at the moment is looking at how to make it attractive to investors. But what I'd like to do to begin with is just think about the opportunity, in the sense that I think, these are the themes of the opportunity. But the question that was in my mind while I was thinking about this morning was, well, how do we know that we've got there? So if we imagine a future, and let's say 3 years time, because I always think 3 years is a nice timeline. It's not 5 years, which is too far ahead for anyone to imagine, not 1 year, which is kind of within the bounds of clarity. You can reasonably clearly see where you're going to be in about a year's time. But in 3 years' time, if we're being successful on the transition from telco to techco in this sense that we've described here, which I think means more softwareization, more agile approach, those kind of learning from the plays of the innovators and so forth. Sorry, not so much the innovators, but the disruptive players of the internet players. But how do we know? How do we know we're being successful? I'll just chuck that out there as an open question. Anyone like to take a lead on that one?
Okay, maybe I can give it a try. What we hear for the maybe last 10 years is that telcos are slowly becoming dump pipes. So we have this network and assets, and our main goal is to offer the cheapest possible package of gigabytes in the mobile subscription or megabits per second. While at the same time, there are a lot of other players that are offering some digital innovative services on top of this network. So it is obvious that we need to do something to change this approach. And one of the options, but probably the trickiest one, is somehow to find a way to cooperate with these OTT players in the means to get some cost sharing at one side and then the revenue share at the other side. But this is probably the trickiest part. We have to deal with the network neutrality, with different regulatory frameworks on different markets. So maybe the other way could be to find some alternatives, to try to find new revenue streams through our own offer. For example, in Telekom Serbia, we do a lot in producing and creating our own video content, some local content or some sports games or something which will be broadcasted exclusively through our applications. So in order to know if we got there, I think the figures will show. If we somehow retain the market and the revenues, it means that we have something as a response to this challenging environment. There is also one opportunity, something that is called network as a service or network as a platform. This is the possibility for operators to open their assets or their capabilities towards towards customers through APIs, through northbound integration, something like Internet of Things or managed security or network slicing, which would come with 5G. So this might be maybe a better way to continue this business game, to offer some alternatives. And if we stay in the game, if we become more than just a dumb pipes, I guess it means that we did some good job.
So that's brilliant, Imagine. Thank you for being brave enough to go first. So if we, I always think about like this is when I was trying to think about, like, I don't know, losing a bit of weight or getting fitter. It's quite nice to have a tangible goal. So are we saying that the tangible goal for that, we would know that we were being successful if in some way we have created tangible new value through a service that's non-traditional, but maybe we could be a bit more specific. So you said, which is either, say, network as a service or an over-the-top play. So something like that. So I'm just thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we could come out of this call and say, right, okay, we've got a plan. We've got 3 or 4 clear measures to say how we know we're being successful and how we might get there. So if we say step 1 is we want some sort of tangible new revenue, sort of tangible new value in the form of either sort of an over-the-top, inverted commas, type service or a network as a service type offering. So I think that's really good. Who'd like to go next? So I'm not, by the way, I'm not going to hold you to this, but I think it's quite an interesting thought experiment to say, what might it look like in the real world?
So I think, Andrew, I'm happy to go next. Sorry, did I speak over?
No,
yeah, no problem. You can go first.
Yeah. So I think broadly, I think we will never get there in inverted commas, because I think in 3 years' time there'll be another set of challenges and another set of evolution. The business will have moved on, the world will have moved on. If you look back sort of 3 years ago before now, going back to sort of pre-COVID, everything's changed and things will constantly change. So I think part of it is about putting yourself in a position to be continuously innovative and innovative at a efficient pace, if that makes sense. So going at identifying opportunities with potentially partnering with other, not quite startups, but people who are bringing new ideas to market and trying to put in a new innovation framework, so you've got quick mechanisms of bringing on new ideas that potentially other people don't. I think we've also got to double down on both our challenge and our value in that, whilst we're not global and we don't own all of the customers in one country, we do understand our customers very well. We do understand the locality of our customers, we understand the data, we understand the networks, and I think there's lots of value we can extract there, which other people don't have. And I think we need to make it easy to integrate with us, and probably as an industry we need to make it easy to integrate, because if I'm a Spotify or a Netflix or someone like that, one of these big telco partners, we need to partner with them, but we need to do it in a way which is easy to integrate, because they don't want to be having to integrate into 4 or 5 different operators in 20 different countries to actually get that scale. So how do we, particularly as one of the smaller operators, double down and provide that capability to partner with people in a way which is easy for them and easy for us to expose to our customers? So I think you're right. It's identifying. Success will be I think being able to do things quickly, to be able to bring new ideas quickly to market, identifying new revenue streams that we don't have today, either OTT or potentially exploiting some of the data that we have about the network, people's movements, and driving value in those ways.
That's really cool, Steve. I'll offer you a cheat solution here, which is we did some research a little while ago, which looked at agility and looked at sort of measures of agility. And what I saw when I looked at that, when I looked across a whole range of measures, was the one thing that was perhaps the biggest single indicator of agility was the ability to bring on new partners, because it's the most difficult thing to do. It's the most wide ranging, or at least this is my theory about why it was the most predictive, because it involves so many different things, doing so many different things well, that if you can do that well, you can do most things well. So if I was going to be your fitness coach, I'd be saying, what I think would be a brilliant objective would be to have a tangible either reduction in time to bring on a new partner or a tangible increase in the numbers of partners. But I think the time one is probably better, because if you just increase partners for the sake of it, you're just working for the sake of work. So I think a tangible reduction in the time to bring on a partner would be a brilliant objective in my view. So if I can paraphrase that, would you be happy to take that as an outcome?
Yeah,
I'm not your CEO, by the way. I'm just
I think that's
playing games here.
It's bringing on new partners for existing OTT services, but also I think bringing on new ideas for new partners and new types of partners. I think is probably the other key thing. So there's cookie cutting what you've already got, but there's how do you enable yourselves to bring on new partners to offer new types of partnerships and new types of digital capability. Brilliant.
So tangible reduction in time to bring on new partners, and a sort of wider range of partners, or wider range of prospective partners, I think might be a way of thinking of that. Sorry, I may have paraphrased that badly, but we can come back and correct these in due course. To know your objectives, by the way. So, but I think this is a useful thought experiment. Jesus, Luis, who'd like to go next?
I'm happy to go next.
Sorry, Luis. To your question on the partners topic, I think it's very important to think about what do we bring to the table in the discussion with the partners, we need to bring something interesting to them to really attract them and build the right partnerships. And I don't have the recipe. If I had it, I would be perhaps the most famous guy in the industry. But I have some of the ingredients that I believe are relevant in discussions with partners. We need to think about the core strengths that we have. For instance, we have a core strength in our technology expertise. So therefore, opportunities on the territories which are closer to the network could be more interesting for us and for the partners. I'm thinking about IoT solutions next to 5G. I'm thinking about edge computing. Those are territories which are closer to our networks, and we bring assets and expertise to the table. Also, the knowledge on our customers. Somebody said that before. This could open up discussions on digital advertising, for instance. Another core strength of telcos is our distribution channel, which is great. Physical distribution, digital distribution. We have a fantastic channel, and this is something that we could leverage in discussions for, I don't know, things that you need to try and test and touch in the shops, perhaps a smart home opportunities. It's all about thinking what are the things that you can bring to the table that could be relevant for the partners. Even the trust that we have built at the local level, as telcos locally, this credibility or this trust could be used for cybersecurity opportunities, or even local cloud opportunities. So those are things that we have and we can leverage in the discussions with our partners, in my view.
So if I were to try and make that into an outcome, so something you could measure, I'll just have a stab at this because this is not perfect, but it would be something like significant improvements in the perception of partners and customers of our capabilities and abilities. So does that sound about right?
Yes, indeed, Andrew. One of the things that we may need to overcome as telco players is the perception, the overall perception that investors and society in general have over the telco space. Telco is historically a very infrastructure-driven business, where in the technology space you have companies that look more at software and applications, content, user interfaces, and this may be more attractive, for investors and society in general. Same with the business models. The telco business model is very capital intensive, whereas the technology models are more OpEx intensive, and you can adjust your resources as you grow, you pay as you grow, and this is also more attractive to the investor community. And even the regulation itself, the telco market is heavily regulated. You have universal service obligations, interconnection obligations. Every concentration is looking into very much detail. Whereas in the technology space, you have data privacy regulation, but other than that, it's a less regulated environment where you have massive deals happening and with very little noise. Facebook buys Instagram, that's fine. Or WhatsApp, that's fine. Microsoft buys LinkedIn, very little noise. So it's perhaps we need to understand those differences and work on the perceptions that the overall package, the telco package, has on the investors' minds, and also the consumers. You think about consumers, the net promoter scores in telco business are very low. If you compare those to the technology companies, the net promoter scores for technology companies are much higher. So this gives you an idea of how the society in general looks at telco vis-a-vis technology companies, and this is something that we need to overcome over time.
I think the idea, though, in my mind, is I'm sort of writing down these sort of general headings to say, look, we will know we'll succeed. We'll know we've succeeded if we create significant improvement in perceptions in key stakeholder groups. And you mentioned investors, I mentioned partners, you also mentioned customers, maybe employees might be another one to add if you're talking about stakeholder groups. Thank you, Luis. Last but certainly not least, what would you like to add to a list of goals?
No, I really enjoyed the conversation. I would really like to build upon some of the comments made. For example, Stephen said there is no end to this transformation. To your question, Andrew, I think we will never end, and by the time we think we have finished, there are more things. And so that is about the answer that we need to provide. So it's about how we do things and become more flexible and adaptive. So I would say for us, really transforming and opening these opportunities is about what Nemanja said about the turning point in terms of the revenue. So we are, connectivity is a flat revenue business model today, it's not decaying. And we really need to turn that into by building on new additional revenue sources. So if you wanted to have one metric, it's really about how we do that in a sustainable way. We have 3 ingredients that we think we should progress to make that happen, and will tell us whether we are successful or not. It is about the culture. It is talking about how we do things, how we change the way we do things. It is about how we build platforms. And some of our colleagues in this conversation already mentioned some of those, like 5G. And now we are deploying, for example, the next generation of 5G with 5G standalone, enabling us network slicing propositions in the near future. We have already that in markets like Germany and UK, to give you an example. We have already very well-known IoT platforms with more than 155 million devices connected, and we are expanding that with new propositions and connecting with 5G as well. And we have also other platforms that are really promising, so Stephen also alluded to, like network as a platform. So becoming a modular business and with more of a programmable business where we can offer new solutions to our customers is really key. And that's those are the leverages that we're expecting to continue growing in this formula. And the third, but not least, but not last, is the software engineers. I wanted to comment that one measure of success is how we are able to attract and retain that talent, how we become more under control of the things that I just mentioned. The only way to do them sustainably and at scale is we do them ourselves. We cannot continue relying on third-party platforms. So maybe in the past, and I think you started saying it's nothing new for the industry trying to become more of an over-the-top player. I think in the past we failed because we have huge dependency on third parties. We need to change that, and we are changing that in Vodafone, where we have about 13,000 software engineers already. So we are complementing an existing base, and we are putting those into different activities like our networks and how we define and plan our networks much smarter, and how we develop all our channels over the top, let's say, without relying on the BSS, typical BSS and SI companies as well. So there are a number of examples where we are already moving into that domain.
That's fantastic. And you've raised a couple of things here that I want to talk about as we move forward, but I'm just going to try and summarize, and then we're going to talk next about the challenges, because I think you've raised, this conversation has flushed on the challenges. But what I'm really excited about is I really quite like this. We've identified 4 things, I think, that you go, okay, from the basis of this 10-minute conversation, there are 4 things that if we could, and by the way, I buy what you're saying, Stephen, about, it doesn't end. Change never ends. But my question was actually, how do we know we're being successful in 3 years' time? And at that point, we'd be, and I think what you would say is, well, we'd have some tangible new over-the-top or networks as a service offerings, but reduction in time to bring on, a significant reduction in the time to bring on new partners and a wider range of partners. Would have improvements in perception of our capabilities from key stakeholder groups, including employees, which we'll come on to because that's part of culture, I think. And
I think we lost
Andrew, you appeared to have frozen. Oh, okay, you're unfrozen.
That if you start to think about those tangible outcomes, you think, okay, now I can start to think about why we're trying to do this. We're trying to make a company that can create new things, that can do things faster, that our stakeholders think of as better, and we can attract talent. So we're a better place to work, and it's more exciting. So all those things, great, that's fantastic. And there are lots of great detail you provided in, and nuance that you've talked around that, which is fantastic. What I'd like to talk about now is what are the challenges, and let's try and wrap this because we don't have a huge amount of time. We could talk a lot about this, but the key challenges and what do we need to do to overcome them? Because so we've sort of set ourselves some goals to get to change, to put something more concrete around this idea of telco to techco. What are now the big challenges? We talked about a range of them. Some of them you can do things about, some of them you can't. I'm not sure that regulation is something that we can really cover a great, we could spend the rest of our time talking about that. So that's not, we'll park that one. I think also when we talk about the other big one that came up in our conversations are things about legacy systems. I think we should talk a little bit about that. But again, we could spend our lives talking about how difficult it is overcoming legacy systems. Maybe we can touch on some of the things we might be able to do. But I think things that were kind of more actionable in a way, we're talking about things like, okay, so one of the things you were talking about was creating a cycle of improvement. Culture and skills is another issue that we raised in the initial conversations, and also the money questions about how we allocate capital. But I've just chucked out some of the ideas that we came up with in the pre-discussion. What do you think are the top challenges to making this change? If you had to pick one, what would you pick? Who'd like to go first on that?
I can go first, Andrew.
Please.
So maybe building on what I was concluding earlier about the software engineers. And so when you really want to make that, take value out of that transformation and transition, we really need to change the culture, and changing the culture for us is one of the biggest opportunities as well as challenges. And I would say, I would couple that with the legacy. So for me, the legacy and the culture go hand by hand, because it's about we need to move away from a legacy culture and adopt that mentality of becoming more agile. So we have already in flight programs that are running already under safe agile principles and ways of working. But we need to do really more of that, and we really need to get the whole organization working. So we are a big organization, and I think Stephen and Jesus were mentioning about the scale, how we do that at the scale. And to be able to do that at scale, and the opportunity for Vodafone is that we already have very good examples where we can put our organization to build things really fast, to your earlier point. And without changing the culture, you cannot do that. So we have the tools, we have the vision, but if you don't have the people and you don't have the culture on this, it's not going to happen.
So when you say changing the culture, what do you mean? Give me an example of an element that, or something that you would describe as a culture that needs to change.
So basically, understanding why we are doing this, it's something that some people understand, that how critical it is to change and become more agile. Some people, you can have software engineers, you can have the tools like GitHub repositories, centralizing all the code, you can have DevOps teams, you can have all the organization in place. But if you don't have the right culture, meaning, for example, the right structure within the organization, the right flexibility to do things, the organization enabling people to fail fast and learn from the mistakes, and do that in a very organic way, that people are fully onboarded into this way of thinking. This is something that is not happening organically as it should. And this is part of the transformation that we are working with across both networks and IT and cyber organizations, where we want to move and accelerate the time to market through implementing agile and deliver products much faster. If we cannot change the culture, we will fail in delivering those.
And I understand what you mean, but what I'm trying to do is to say, so imagine I'm sitting here on the other side of the audience and thinking, how do I know if my team has got the right culture? So, I think about my team today, and I think about my team at some point in the future, let's say in a year's time. How will I know that? And you talked here about failing fast. Let's take this specific example to learn. How do you know that that has changed in the culture? How would you say, yeah, I can show that?
Well, I guess it's by having no risk aversion. So having really a conversation about how we have demonstrated that we are testing things new, and we have very good examples already doing that. But as I said, we need to do that at scale, and also recognize where we also have examples where we haven't learned. So today we cannot still, to your point of becoming very precise about when we will realize we have changed this culture, is when the cases where we are not building things at scale, and we are not learning from each other, and we are not reducing and pivoting fast on where things are not delivering value, and are showing examples of how we traditionally have been operating by, for example, spending months and years delivering a solution.
If I can give you an example of someone else that I heard talking about this, was quite interesting. He said that, and he's a guy who came out of one of the internet is, and he moved into an operator. And he said to me that, well, if I feel that if my team aren't failing 50% of the time, if 50% of the stuff that we're doing isn't failing, we're not trying hard enough. We're not adapting that. So I thought that was quite a good example of it. But I think the interesting thing about that question is, it has to come from the very top. The very top of your company has to be comfortable with that sort of idea, because it's no use you being, if you're in the middle of the company having that idea and your boss is thinking, well, that's terrible, because that's never going to change anything. So I'm flagging that as something that we've seen as a really important point, is to say, actually not focusing on failure. Personally, I hate this idea of failing fast. I think learning fast is what should be talked about. But I think this idea that you should fail is a really good idea. Stuff shouldn't work. If you're it's not, and it shouldn't not work through stupidity, but because you're trying enough things that enough things fail. And I think something around that would be one of the ways I'd look for it. Can I open it to the other members of the panel? Because it was a great answer, by the way, in the matter. Thank you. What are the challenges and how we change them?
So I think, as we said, it's not just a technology thing. It can't be just seen to be technology. It needs to be throughout the business and the way in which the business engage with and work with technology. We need to be moving more to a sort of partnerial relationship where we work together with the business to achieve and feel accountable for common outcomes. I think, as an example, in the past, we were doing a transformation program, and it was really an IT-led program. There wasn't that much business engagement and business involvement, and the business felt no accountability for the outcome and the date. So they would, raise change requests, put in changes, and say, okay, I want this new feature and that new feature, and this is a new red line that we must have before we go live. Oh, that's going to take you 4 months. Well, if it's going to take you 4 months to do that before we go live, then I've got this other opportunity that I'd like to bring in. So that keeping bringing in more and more accountabilities, we sort of reset the program and changed the way that the business led and the business engagement, such that they felt equal accountability for go live, and it really made them challenge the changes that were necessary and feel the sort of same, not pain, but if they're asking for more stuff, then realizing that you can't fit a quart into a pint bottle, and you do need to make compromises. So I think getting that engagement and business buy-in into the shared outcome is essential. And I think, as Louis said, actually being able to move quickly. And I think sometimes business ask for everything in version 1 because the CapEx gets pulled for version 2 and version 2 never happens. So there's less willingness to compromise there in not quite an MVP, but this is what we can go live with, and this is how we're going to evolve the product over the next three to 6 months. So having a mindset and a roadmap that you can actually, it's okay, you're not going to get this on day 1, but you will be able to get it in month 2 or month 3 or month 4, and having that shared roadmap accountability, I think also helps. I think,
but that sounds like quite sort of a chuck it over the fence type process. You say, here's our requirements, off you go. Doesn't sound, as you say, very DevOpsy. How do you change that? What do you do to break down the?
I think we invited the business into the tent, so to speak, and not quite moving towards an agile organization yet, because but in that sort of having collaboration and having accountability, and also having that again driven from the top down to the business. This is not an IT project, this is a business project, and you are equally accountable for the outcomes. And also, I think getting the business to be honest about change. So not everything is a technology change. Some things can be a business change, or some things must be a business change. You can't just deliver the same processes and the same capability that you had previously on the same on new stack and new technology. You need to think about why you're doing things, business value.
Okay, thank you. Namanta, Jesus, what would you like to throw in?
Okay, I'd like to comment the OSS BSS transformation as a great challenge, and there are 2 reasons for that. One is that once I heard some interesting fact that like 70 to 80% of transformations fail at some point of time or at some parts of its initial scope. And the other reason I want to mention that, I think we hold a world record. We have a piece of our OSS software, which is like 25 years old now, and it's still responsible for some parts of the fixed line network, inventory and order management. And for the last 10 years, we try to replace piece by piece of that software, but this project is still ongoing. We don't see the end to it. So this is a big challenge. We need to find an IT framework or a solution which is a kind of a one size fits all. It should support this mass volume but simple services like mobile subscription, and all the way to complex but low volume services like mobile private networks. And there's a lot of components, and the reason this is such a huge challenge, there are so many obstacles. First of all, lack of budget, lack of skill set, internal skill set to switch from one tool set to the other. Then complexity, a lot of legacy pieces of software everywhere that needs somehow to be either put into this same framework or replaced, totally replaced. Not to mention a lack of clear goals. What do we want to achieve? Where is the end? As we said, digitalization and transformation that has no end. When do we know that we did this right. And also, Luis mentioned this cultural change. There is probably this is not this is a significant factor. You have this risk aversion. We do some things one way, but now we need to switch totally into something how to say when we don't see the end of it, when we don't see the clear goals, this might make some people reluctant. And it's not just about choosing the right software, it's about changing the way we work, and a lot of support is needed everywhere. That's why I think it's one of the very challenging factors.
That is a very complex set of challenges, Amanda. And so, I'm sort of trying to think about how to summarize some of the things, but what I think I'm going to do is pass it over to Jesus to give his input, and I'll try and summarize. And I think we're quite close to our close time. So apologies to the questions. Have had a quick look at them. They're a bit too complex to try and answer on this call. So we'll try and get back to you afterwards. But Jesus, how would you like to talk about the challenges and the next steps?
To me, one of the main challenges, if not the main challenge, is what I call the business oxygen. Is very challenging to to make transformations or new opportunities without financial resources. You need those resources to invest in those opportunities, in those transformations, and that is very difficult to make if your core business, your core telco business, is under pressure. And the core telco business, particularly in Europe, is under very much pressure. It's very difficult to achieve the returns or capital than the investors are expecting. It's very difficult to achieve the margins that the financial community is expecting, and therefore the focus is many times to rework your core business to achieve the minimum decent standards that you need to consider yourself to be in decent shape, and therefore you don't find time and you don't find the financial resources to invest on those opportunities. So finding this business oxygen, in my view, is one of the main challenges. And again, this has to do with changing the perception of the investor community and the society in general. We need to get out of this trap. You don't get the resources, you don't transform, then your business becomes more ugly, then it's more difficult to attract investors. So we need to get out of this trap somehow. I
think if I may try and conclude, thank you very much, Jesus. It makes perfect sense. I mean, what the theory, I'm not telling you that this is what everybody's being successful doing, although I would point, I'd always say have a look at Elisa, the Finnish operator, who I think do this pretty well, is that they have a theory, and they've worked on this theory for the last 17, 18 years, where they meet their primary commitment to their shareholders, and then they use that as their, and they make sure that's carefully agreed, and they use that and the margins they can take out of that to invest in the new stuff, and they invest very carefully in the new stuff. The flip side of that is you have to take cost out of everything else you do, because the revenues are quite hard to get into your core business because it's not a growing business. So you have to, the technology side, reduce the costs in ongoing operations in order to be able to invest in the new ones. And the interesting point here is it is not, well, to some extent, it is a zero-sum game, in the sense that you're not slashing and burning. One of the things that I think impedes change is a fear of loss. We fear that we lose our jobs, we fear that we lose position or status or those kind of things. And actually, the reality is, in a situation where the industry is now, albeit going through it relatively slowly, we have to change, and that change involves the feeling of loss, but it's not necessarily loss. And what I'm seeing in most organizations is that people aren't being made redundant in great ways. There are some people whose time it is to change, who want to do something else, retire or join another company. There are other people who want to take on new skills and grow with the company. And it works, I think, where the culture is right, and the culture has to come from the top. So if the top's setting out clear goals and clear aspirations and is honest about what's happening, and you can create that internal alignment of priorities, and genuinely the culture is coming from the top, saying it is okay to fail occasionally. When we know that this is part of the stuff that we plan to fail, our testing, you don't want to fail on your major programs, but stuff, stuff happens, we know that. But nonetheless, that sort of clarity of vision and culture from the top seems to me to be the bedrock of it. And then you have to have alignment of stakeholders, both external and internal. And I think we set out some goals here, which is to develop some new revenues and some new services, both OTT and network as a service, to reduce the time to bring on new partners. And obviously partners are an important part. We haven't really talked about that, but that's another game altogether. We need to have improvements in the perception of capabilities in our key stakeholders. And I think that's probably internal as well as external. So that's employment, employees, investors, customers, partners. And we need to attract talent across the business. And we can see what the barriers are. I think the game plan is there. I can see what we need to do. It doesn't make it easy. I think we've come up at the end of our time. So I don't know if I'm looking towards the ether, and there she is, like an angel. She has appeared from the ether, but can't hear her because she's on mute.
Sorry, I was waiting in the wings. It was such good stuff. I kind of hated to barge in, really, but I'm afraid our time is up. I thought that was really good and a lot of insights and some good flesh on the bones of what we mean on this rather nebulous topic of Telco and Techco. So thank you all very much indeed. And I think this is most definitely one that will have a lot of visits on the on-demand, because I think there was an awful lot of stuff in there to take in and to act on. So thank you very much, all of you. Great session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.